Okay, go ahead.
Our mission, Helping Parents Heal, is a nonprofit organization dedicated to assisting parents whose children have passed. Through support and resources offered, we aspire to help individuals become shining light parents, meaning a shift from a state of emotional heaviness to one of hopefulness and greater peace of mind. HPH goes a step beyond other groups by allowing the open discussion of spiritual experiences and afterlife evidence in a non dogmatic way. Helping Parents Heal affiliate groups welcome everyone, regardless of religious or non religious background, and encourage open dialogue. Attendance at this meeting is voluntary. We hope that participants will learn from and share with each other. Discussions here are not designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Zoom meetings run by leadership are not confidential. These meetings typically feature guest presenters and are posted on YouTube so that affiliate members worldwide can watch and benefit. Neither type of HPH meeting is designed to replace traditional therapy or spiritual counseling. Helping Parents Heal offers a wide variety of speakers, allowing parents to learn about many possible ways to heal. This includes presenters covering progressive topics such as afterlife evidence and connecting with our children who've passed. The views expressed by our guest speakers may or may not reflect the opinions of Helping Parents Heal leaders and members, so we ask that you take from their presentations whatever may benefit you personally. Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here with us this evening, and thank you so much, Dr. Schwartz, for being here.
Thank thank you so much, Dr. Schwartz, for being with us. We are just thrilled to have you. And let me go ahead and read your bio, which is really impressive. And I know that lots of people will have questions tonight. We have time for questions, so please feel free to put them in the chat box as Gary's speaking. Dr. Gary Schwartz is an internationally respected psychologist, researcher, and pioneer in the study of consciousness and life after death. After receiving his PhD from Harvard University and serving as a tenured professor at Yale University, Dr. Schwartz joined the University of Arizona, where he spent more than 3 decades exploring the intersection of science, spirituality, healing, and human consciousness. As director of the Laboratory for Advances in Consciousness and Health, Dr. Schwartz devoted his career to investigating evidence from the continuation of consciousness beyond physical death. His groundbreaking work with mediums, energy healing, and the SoulPhone project has offered hope and comfort to countless people around the world seeking a deeper understanding of love, life, and our eternal connections. He's the author of numerous scientific papers and best-selling works, including The Afterlife Experiments and The God Experiments. And he has one that's going to be published soon as well, and we're very excited about that. Dr. Schwartz continues to bridge the worlds of science and spirituality with compassion, integrity, and visionary thinking. And without further ado, Irene and I would love to introduce Dr. Gary Schwartz. And welcome, Gary. We're just so grateful that you're here with us this evening.
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be here, and the idea that the work that we do can contribute to all of our lives, not just here, but quote there, is a very obviously rewarding and cherished privilege.
I think that a lot of people don't necessarily know about how you started into this, and it would be wonderful after earning your PhD at Harvard and then teaching at Yale. How did you venture into the field of consciousness and afterlife research?
Well, the consciousness part begins actually when I was at Harvard, and I actually taught a course on consciousness and self-regulation at Harvard, and also edited an academic book series called Consciousness and Self-Regulation, but it was from a non-spiritual, conventional, scientific, materialist perspective. I mean, I had been raised in an essentially a-religious, pretty much skeptical home. I was raised that it was ashes to ashes, dust to dust, case closed. I was taught that the material world is what exists, that consciousness is a creation of the brain, and so on. And I accepted that as the truth. When I went to Yale, I my thinking began to change, and it was partly inspired by an accidental discovery that I made, um, working in the area of what came to be known as systemic memory, the idea that things in the universe at any level, from the micro to the macro, could store energy and information and therefore have memory. And that implied that it would have consciousness. And when I followed the logic of that, it led me to predict the such things as near-death out-of-body experiences and survival of consciousness after death, which I thought was woo-woo. It was not anything real, and yet the scientific theory was taking me to that area. And I remember when I was at Yale, and that I realized I couldn't tell anyone about this because it was so controversial. In fact, I said I was going to touch it not just with a 10-foot pole, but with a 110-foot pole. And it wasn't until I moved to the University of Arizona that the more personal side of the picture occurred. And what happened is I met three different women, and I described them in the Afterlife Experiments book, well, two of them in the Afterlife Experiment. Then the third person came along. And in each case, these were people who were grieving the loss of loved ones. Susie Smith grieving the loss of her mother, Stardust Johnson, who was the wife of a professor who was a professor of music who had passed away, and then Dr. Linda Russick, whose father was a distinguished cardiology, and he passed away. And in each case, these people came to me and said, Gary, is there anything that you do, since you work in consciousness and self-regulation and healing and so on? Do you believe in life after death? Is it possible? And I realized that yes, there was theory that was pushing me there, but I never actually did research on it. And so what happened was, and my heart went out to these people. So I was pushed there by theory, by evidence that led me to be open, but I was pulled there by love, by Susie's love for her mother, by Stardust Johnson's love for her husband, by Linda's love for her father. And when you're pushed and pulled in the same direction, it's very hard to resist. So I began to do this work in secret, and then circumstance unfolded, both evidential and experiential. You talk about the idea of divine planning. Many things then led me to enter this world. That's how it started.
It's amazing. And you have now conducted so many years of research with mediums and evidential information. What, I know this is a broad question, but what findings have most convinced you that communication beyond physical death is real? Could you maybe, I mean, I know we'll talk about
Oh,
the
sure.
soul phone in a little bit, but I'd love to know what maybe first pushed you into believing that this is possible.
I was first pushed there, and not just pulled there, but pushed there by the evidence. when I began to be introduced to really gifted mediums who could get highly accurate information under controlled conditions and where the explanations that were offered could not account for what was being observed. And a perfect example of that was when I did research in the late 1990s as part of a HBO special called Life After Life, where we invited 5 different evidence-based mediums, evidential mediums, one of whom was George Anderson, to come to my laboratory at the University of Arizona and participate in an actual experiment, controlled experiment, where all 5 of them, quote, read 2 different sitters. They didn't know who they were. They had no prior exposure to them. They couldn't see them, but they were allowed to talk to them. I recorded brainwaves and electrocardiograms while they were doing this. And the evidence was extraordinary, extraordinarily accurate. And to this day, when I experience mediums, be they someone like Suzanne Giesen, who all of you know, or Rhonda, who many of you don't know, who spontaneously became a medium and an evidence-based research medium, I stand in awe. And I don't think, to tell you the truth, I don't think I've lost any more fascination with the fact that individuals can connect and experience communication and have it be so evidential that what else could you say but thank you? So it was the mediumship research, which was published in the book The Afterlife Experiments, that pushed me into the direction that this has to be real. And the mediumship research, of course, is only one part of many different areas of research that all point to survival of consciousness. But my work was particularly involved with mediums, and they have become inspirations and friends and family in some cases, extended family. So that's part of it. But then, because I have a background in technology and electrical engineering and so on, I realized that for many reasons, if we could develop a technology that would enable people in spirit, who, by the way, we now refer to in my new book that I'll be talking about, introducing it literally at the meeting. Um, it's going to be the birthing of the book is going to happen at Helping Parents Heal, um, which is called the SoulPhone Experiment, with the subtitle Breakthrough Scientific Evidence for Spirit Communication and Collaboration. In that book, I reveal many different examples of both unpublished and published research, which I have not, much of which I have not shared publicly, including NHPH, which for the first time have now been put together. And when you look at that data and you combine it with the work for mediumship, it's the way I've been putting it in the book is that when you look at the totality of the research, I've come to the conclusion that the evidence takes you to beyond any reasonable doubt. And what that means is what's left is unreasonable doubt.
Oh,
And that, of course, once you have that as an experience, your perception of the world, the greater universe, what Mark Pistic refers to as the greater reality, and so on, you can't help but feel privileged to live in this kind of universe.
I agree 100%. And I just want to say I'm so honored to have Mark Anthony on here this evening as well. I don't want everybody to turn their attention from from Erie, but at the same time, he's also going to be a keynote speaker at our conference. He's also someone who brings science into his presentations, and we're so grateful to Mark and to Rocky as well. And I also want to say that the fact that Rhonda became a medium, this is something that's very exciting for all of us at Helping Parents Heal because of the fact that a lot of our certified, Mark Ireland certified mediums now are parents who actually love this and, first of all, go into this to communicate with their children in spirit. And then it turns out that they can communicate with other children in spirit as well. So, I wanted to ask you a question that I think is something that you might be able to explain a little bit. Um, what role do you think that love and emotion and the emotional connection that we have with our loved ones on the other side um, seem to play in the communication that we have across dimensions? Is that something that maybe you could tell us?
Well, I'd be happy to share with you my opinion, which I can say is an informed opinion. So it's in part driven by science, and it's a voice that contributes to many others who say the same thing. By the way, Mark Anthony is a hero of mine, as is Rocky, and the idea that he's on this call that now I'm all self-conscious here. Okay, he's the best. And anyway, the question of love, what's love got to do with it? Everything. And I say this not just from mediumship work and from everything that's come through mediumship work, but I come to this from physics through astrophysics. Many people are not aware of this, but that um, Sir Isaac Newton, who was one of the great scientists, was deeply spiritual, and his theory of gravity um, was very much related to and complementary to his more spiritual view of the universe. And if I were to ask you, if you think about what kind of a force is something that is mutually attractive, non-judgmental, whether you're a big star or a little person, whether you're black or white, young or old, so on, Republican or Democratic, your forces, not only are these mutually attractive forces, but you can trust them. They're dependable. They're non-judgmental. And they bring and hold everything together. And when you think about that at a psychological level, what is something that brings people together, that is trustworthy, that you want to be, the potential to be trustworthy, which is unconditional, and so on? Well, it sounds like gravity. And what Newton said was that he experienced the existence of gravity as an expression of God's love for the cosmos. Um, so the idea that the that this attractive force and mutual attractive force with these qualities can be expressed by us as as microsystems within the macrosystems, as above, so below, but also as below, so above. So for me, many things point to the notion that love is what it's all about. And of course, it helps your parents heal. What is the motivation of the children and the parents? If there's any organization that expresses that, for me, that's further evidence.
That's beautiful. Oh my goodness. Well, speaking of being able to talk to our children in spirit, Obviously, if you're a medium, you can do so. We can also connect through a lot of other ways. There are so many things such as automatic writing, meditation, etc. But could you tell us about the SoulPhone project and what inspired your team to begin this groundbreaking work?
It was partly motivated by the fact that there are so few people who have the level of gifts like a Mark Anthony or George Anderson or any of the Suzanne Giesman. Think of these exceptional people. They're a very small number, and yet there are many people who would love to be able to remain being connected with their loved ones, not just quote here, but quote there. It's for both sides. And there's a development in science which is called post-materialism, the transition from where I was when I was in college and then early faculty, which was a mainstream materialist science. Post-materialism is where consciousness, which includes love and emotion, is fundamental to the universe. And therefore, what we call matter, then the material world, is a manifestation or a special case of that core process. Now, if there was a way for the physical like properties that we have in this realm, if those were part of the greater system, the greater reality, then in principle, from a theoretical point of view, it would be possible to build technology that could be super sensitive, that would make it possible for what we refer to as now PMPs, post material people, or in our research, we call them PMPs, post material participants. We're the MPs, they're the PMPs. And we call us the B team, and they're the A team. And the idea that you can, and what's happening in the area of technology is that, I mean, almost every day you can find YouTubes, which has become a real hobby for me, to keep abreast of some of the most, the most uh, forward-looking developments in terms of ultra sensitive detectors and software capabilities, and of course, what's happening in quantum field theory and on and on. I mean, we're living at a very unique time in the development of human understanding of the greater world, both at the micro level and at the spiritual level. And so the opportunity to keep up with that and then make that available to those on quote the other side who really wish to remain connected, not just with their own family members here, but because they love the planet, they love humanity, they appreciate the beauty. This is home. That kind of greater love can be fostered not only when we're in the physical and material, but when we're in the quote post physical. So, partly because of the limitation of just the sheer number of people who can do this subjectively, and also partly to be able to increase the potential accuracy of the capacity for communication. That combination is what triggered the inspiration for the SoulPhone idea.
So now, what progress has been made? I know that you have been working on this for quite some time, not only in the lab, but with so many incredible mediums. And it would be nice to know a little bit about what the possibilities you envision for the future with the soul phone are. So I know that this is part of your book, and I don't know if this is a spoiler, but maybe you could tell us just a little bit.
Sure. Well, first of all, we have reached a stage. I distinguish between proof of concept, the basic science proof of concept that not only is survival of consciousness real, but that technology can be used to definitively document communication and collaboration with spirit, with PMPs. there's that level of research. And then there is the development of practical SoulPhone systems. And what do I mean by practical SoulPhone systems? Not merely that they're accurate, but also they can be accurate in sufficient speed of communication so that you can have a real dialogue, even at the simplest level, what we call a binary response. Uh, with a keyboard, any given key is just a button press. You press the K key, and you hopefully see a K. And you don't want to see an L, you don't want to see a P. If you can type, you want the K to be a K. And you don't want it to take 5 or 10 minutes to get a K. You want to be able to push the button, and within a second, get a response. Where we have been, and then the third thing, of course, is it has to be safe. And then you also want, and that safety includes minimizing the potential for the abuse of a technology that has the potential to be, quote, disruptive or transformative. And where we are with regard to the technology, so where we are in terms of to summarize all of this, is in the book, and I've not done this publicly before. I lay out what I consider to be the tipping point evidence of what makes the definitive case for the proof of concept and of both life after death and also the idea that this is possible. It's like the Wright brothers moment when the plane first took off. It was not completely impractical. Plane flew for all 12 seconds, couldn't really get anywhere. There were no windows. You couldn't do anything with it. But it had proved that flight was possible. We're now, I would say, not only clearly at that stage, but there is this complementary work which supports the directions in which it can go. Where we have been unable to succeed is in getting from proof of concept to practical communication technology. And the technical question is what's called signal to noise. The quote problem is that the energy, the power that a PMP, when they from their realm enter our realm, their energy levels are so tiny compared to the background noise of everything in the environment that it takes many hours of data collection in order to get an accurate image or an accurate conclusion. And that's not useful at a practical level. And so this is where the R&D engineering process is occurring. And thus far, we have not yet made the breakthrough to the practical side. Does that mean, therefore, that we have there's a wonderful quote from Thomas Edison where he talks about how he hasn't failed to make to make a light bulb 10,000 times. What he's done is learn 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Exactly.
And so we're at that stage where we're getting we keep making progress toward getting to that to the light that stays on and can become useful, but we're not there yet. And one of the reasons for writing this book is to not only make this content more available for everyone, not just people who are already accepting, but more for people who could see the possibility, but also to then inspire others, hopefully, to take on the charge of developing the work. The last thing is that there are major ethical and moral issues in both the discovery process and if I might say, God willing, the technology becomes available, because the potential for abuse, serious abuse, in the wrong hands could be, to put it bluntly, challenging for humanity. And therefore, you want to bring this to the world in a way where it can be received with the sacredness and love for which it's intended. And it's up to humanity to develop the caring and the wisdom to appreciate this gift and then use it for the best and highest good. And so we're trying to also make that point clear so that not just a reason for hope, but there's a reason to do so in a way where everyone can benefit here and there.
That's a very good point. I hadn't actually thought about the safeguards that you have to put in place to make sure that, I guess, this technology doesn't get into the wrong hands. But I also would love to, and this will be my last question. I want Irene to be able to ask questions from the parents who are on here.
Sure.
But how do you respond to skeptics who question afterlife research and spirit communication? I would assume that you have to deal with this all the time.
The answer is yes. First of all, um, I have compassion for people who either don't know the information, are threatened by the information. There are many forces that would lead one to be challenged by having to face the idea that there's more to life than we currently recognize, or that many people recognize, because it implies increased responsibility, increased accountability, the need for more integrity, more humility. And so I try to come to whatever the negativity is, I try to come to it, first of all, from a sense of compassion and trying to understand why it is or how it is that they feel the way they do. And then it's my responsibility to try to show them or give them the opportunity to reconsider what they currently think, and therefore, in part, come to know their own feelings about this. Now, in some contexts, one can do that. In others, you know, one has to be just accepting that you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But sometimes you can't even tell the horse about water. And so you have to respect each person where they are, um, and hope that the opportunity will come that they can discover that this is the case, and that they don't have to wait till they become a PMP and then discover it's not what they thought it was. And by the way, in the book, I give examples of the secret people that we've been working with. I mean, it's where they'd have to change their mind after they died about about what life is like. Um, and some of it's very amusing, and I
They,
share some of that as well.
they certainly do have to change their opinions, and it's funny because I've heard so many stories that reflect that as well, of people who are very down to earth, don't believe in any of this, who immediately when they get over are getting back in touch with us and telling us.
Are they really? I hope you've been keeping a journal about that, or
Oh
can
yeah.
somehow write about it. I think that's extraordinary. That really needs to be known and shared
Well, it's a lot of fun.
someday.
So
Yes,
exciting to hear that people get it once they get over there, and pretty much right away, actually. But I know Irene has questions in the chat box. Irene, go ahead.
Sure. Yes, we have some interesting questions. Sherry is asking, and Sherry is one of our wonderful members, caring listener. Dr. Schwartz, some parents have had spontaneous, unsolicited experiences of objectively seeing their loved ones visiting from the world of spirit. What can you share with us about these less common types of higher dimensional connections? Thank you.
Wow. I wish that there were data about the kinds of those kinds of experiences when they've occurred in a parent's life, um, the context, and so on. The truth is, from a scientific point of view, we know absolutely nothing about it. That's why I would say, yes, from a scientific point of view, I think it's fair to say we know virtually absolutely nothing about this. I've had the privilege to not just learn about this, but live with it because of fate conspiring for me to have met Rhonda, and then Rhonda discovering that she could literally see spirit in three-dimensional space, as opposed to just in a dream or in one's mind's eye. And for the record, being able to have a dream or to experience in one's mind eye is wonderful. But having a visual experience in three-dimensional space and have it not be merely a quote hallucination, but an actual um, experience can be transformative if you're prepared and open to receive it. I've known at least two mediums who on the have told me that they don't see spirit and that they couldn't handle it if they could, that they would be frightened if they actually saw the deceased there. And it's much easier for them to cope with the gift by having it be more restricted to in their mind's eye. And I remember when Susie Smith passed, and some of you have heard about Susie, who I probably should, I don't know whether you should do it now or later, but so Susie became Susie wrote a total of 30 books in the field of parapsychology and life after death. It had been a lifelong journey for her. She was a journalist who then became a lay scientist who ended up becoming a sort of a medium herself, although she didn't like to talk about it and so on. And Susie was fond of saying she couldn't wait to die so that she could prove that she was still here. And Susie was um, after Susie passed. I mean, I was very close with Susie, and I wanted her to be able to have her dream fulfilled. And yet, prior to meeting Rhonda, I was afraid of what happened if I woke up and there was Susie. And I'm a trained clinical psychologist. And I know that Susie would never hurt me. I know it was, not a quote sane response, at least as an adult. And yet I still had that kind of fear of seeing. And I think that's why it's wonderful when people don't have the fear and then and they can actually experience. And that again is where the both maturity and the love um, comes in so strongly. Um, the I don't see spirit, I don't hear spirit. In fact, one of my colleagues, Dr. Robert Steck, once referred to me as the Helen Keller of afterlife research. Um, and we'll have meetings in our living room with Rhonda where we're 30 plus people on what we call the A team, PMP, post material people, are in the living room, and I'm looking at a room that's empty of people. And yet we've got this whole large community there. And I've learned to not only give Rhonda the benefit of the doubt because the evidence requires it, but also to be able to have this tremendous gratitude for the fact that I can have that privilege and that I can look forward to someday when I transition that I'll be able to spend time with these people and come to know them in ways that they can come to me to know me right now, but I can't come to know them. I know this is a long, drawn-out answer, but it's the idea that parents are having these experiences and that and learning more about them, it would be something that would be wonderful to have research done with.
Thank you. Yes, it would be. I'm not sure if you're going to answer this question, if you're going to say you'll have to read the book, but Leslie is asking, what has been the most interesting post-material contact that you've had? The one that left you going, wow.
I will. There's so many, but
Okay.
I think I will honor and share one that I don't think I've shared publicly in any HPH meeting, and maybe nowhere else. But I am going public in the book, and since it's coming out in a couple of months anyway, I will. I'll share it here, and I'm willing to quote pay the price. It's so. Here's the story, the quick story. Various circumstances, and this is more than 15 years ago, led me to seriously entertain the hypothesis that one of the members of the A team, our PMP collaborators, was a person who um, whose name is Harry, but whose full name, and I still get a little embarrassed to say this because it's kind of disbelieving, but is Harry Houdini. And some of you may know that Harry Houdini was very interested in the question of life after death. He loved his mother, and after his mother passed, he really wanted to know whether or not she was okay, whether she had survived, and so on. He also lived at a time when there were many mediums who were engaged in fraudulent physical mediumship, and also some who were engaged in fraudulent mental mediumship. And he felt that those people were doing a disservice. So he spent a significant time exposing fraudulent mediums, at the same time caring about life after death. Um, anyway, quote, Harry joined the team, and I've had, there were, because I'm a quote, boring scientist and I need replicated data, I needed to get evidence that Harry would appear in readings when for example, when I would be present, where people would say, there's someone here, and I know in one case, for example, she's saying, now I see him, now I don't. He'll say, you'll understand that that's important, or the kinds of evidence that would imply that he was who he was without necessarily giving his name. Anyway, he became one of the first test pilots, and Harry and I spent hours together doing the first phase of the practical applied SoulPhone research, as well as basic science. And in 2010, I published a paper, my first paper, in a peer-reviewed journal, 3 experiments, and I referred to the invited spirits by numbers: spirit 1, spirit 2, spirit 3, spirit 4, and so on. And the editor said, they're having trouble keeping track of all these spirits. Could you give them names? So I decided that what I would do is actually use their first names and not use their second names. And that therefore someday I would be able to say the person that was called Harry in the very first publication featuring this person's name, Harry's data, was actually Harry Houdini. All right. That's the background for what I'm about to tell you. So I was having a meeting with the then CEO of Canyon Ranch, Some of you may have heard of Canyon Ranch. It's a health resort which headquarters in Tucson, internationally known um, health promotion corporation. I had the privilege of serving for 11 years as their corporate director of development of energy healing, and I worked directly with the CEO. And it turned out he was very interested in the SoulPhone, and he invited me to give bi-weekly lectures on a book I wrote called The Sacred Promise. And I confessed to him, he was a fan of Harry Houdini. So I confessed with him that I had been doing this work with Harry Houdini, and I made a video to show him some of the real-time data collection. And I was at this meeting with him, and he said, Gary, he says, I can see that you've got data showing that he shows increased responses when you ask him to make responses and so on. He says, but can he control the amplitude of the response? Can he make one bigger or smaller ones? And he said, like, for example, and he loved baseball. So he said, for example, could he hit a home run? Could he hit such a big thing that we could literally hit it into the stands? And I said, that's an interesting metaphor. And it's an interesting question. I've never asked Harry to do that. When I get home, I will check that out. So I came home, and again, people didn't know this, but I had two silicon photomultiplier systems operating. And these are technologies which were state of the art 15 years ago. They could detect single photons of light in a pitch black environment. And I would leave them running both in my office at home, in this room, and also at the laboratory. And I would have what I call free play periods, where people like Harry could go practice like biofeedback, playing with the equipment to see how good they could get. Could they get to the point where they could create rapid and accurate responses? And I came into my office. I was having a meeting with a postdoc who was going to be meeting me here at home. She didn't know anything about the Harry Houdini work. I walked into my study, and I have this big screen monitor with this large window with the photon spikes going. And normally, think of, if you can see how big this is with my hands, these spikes would be coming up from here to here, and the peak one was 25 units. So typically the largest response was 25, it spontaneously. And I came in, and all of them were this size. They had shrunk. And I said, is there something wrong with the equipment? Because it's the first thing to look at. So I started looking at the hardware and then looking at the software. And then I noticed that the scale, the y-axis, was no longer 0 to 25 because it had an automatic reset. It was now 0 to 175. That implied that there had been a big, big spike while I was away. Now, while I was driving home from this, I was thinking about Harry. And I was thinking about the movie, The Field of Dreams. You remember the baseball movie in the field? And if we build it, they will come, and so on. And I was thinking about that and wondering whether Harry could hit home runs. And then I came in and I said, could Harry have hit a home run and I wasn't there? Well, what I would typically do is in the old days, if we wanted to make time-lapse recordings of something on the screen, you'd have a video camera on a tripod that would then look at the monitor, and you could have it take a photograph automatically if it had time-lapse capability in it. So I had a time-lapse camera going while I was gone. I never scored that data, but I could go back and look at it. So I played it back, and sure enough, as I was opening the garage to get into the house, this gigantic spike had occurred. So I said, could this be Harry? Now, I had to give a talk on the Sacred Promise that night at Canyon Ranch. but I was having dinner, and afterwards I had a few minutes, and I said, Harry, if this was you, could you make another big one? Could you make a larger one? And I sat and I looked, and a couple of minutes later, gigantic spike occurs. The scale is changed, and I now saw one with my own eyes, live in real time. There's no substitute for direct experience. And when I saw that, I said, well, the first one could have been a coincidence, could have been an artifact. The second one, well, it still could have been a coincidence. You know the phrase "third the charm." Well, I had to go off and give my lecture at Canyon Ranch, so I did. I went off, came back home. The the unit was 0 to 25. It was the big spikes with the small. And then I said, "Three's the charm. I'm going to give Harry one more opportunity, and I'm going to invite Rhonda to sit with me, and we'll see whether, if this is really Harry, whether he can do this and do it for the two of us." And as fate would have it, again, minute or 2 minutes after I made the request, there is this again gigantic spike, 173 units, 700% taller than the the typically small responses. And I realized that Harry hadn't just hit a home run, he had hit it out of the park. And I then did a formal experiment with Harry, which I then did at the university, where we deliberately got control data, and then we had normal responses, and then I asked him if he could make big ones and then quote huge ones. And sure enough, when you average all the data and you looked at the peak responses, he was able to do that um, on request.
That's completely amazing. And I was just going to say, we have so little time left and we're going to
Sure.
have you back. But what I really want to maybe sum up this whole discussion with is one last question, which is what message would you most want parents to hear from both a scientific and spiritual perspective concerning their children who are in spirit right now?
I will say it's funny because I don't have children per se in spirit, um, but I'm going to use the word our. Um, when we lose a child and we engage in grief, our children know they're okay. Yes, they're grieving being with us, and they desperately want us to know that they're okay. They don't want to see us in so much pain. It's one thing to grieve because you're missing someone physically and you want to be with them and share a life with them and so on. But there are other levels of grief, as you know, and our prolonged grief causes grief for our children and vice versa. That's the nature of love. And so it's the idea that by our learning that life after death is real, that we will have the choice if our children love us and we love our children to reclaim that relationship after we transition, then we both have an opportunity and a responsibility to live with the grief but heal in a way that is in a greater loving service both to our family in the physical but also in the post-physical. And it just provides a further incentive to celebrate the gift of life after death.
That is a beautiful answer. Oh my goodness. And Irene, did you have one last question for Gary as well?
In the chat, there were still questions, so we're going to have Gary
We're
come
going to
back.
have you back, obviously.
Yes,
But
yes.
I, there's other things that I would love to know, just kind of to sum up what we're talking about. Um, so maybe going a little further with what you said, a lot of the parents in Helping Parents Heal are searching for hope and understanding. What has your research shown about the survival of consciousness that maybe you can just let them know?
Okay. The available evidence. Now, remember, I am a conservative scientist. I always say that I'm a boring scientist. So if I don't have, quote, hard data about something, I feel, quote, guilty and irresponsible for making claims. Again, that's just the nature of the nature of being a scientist. But if you ask me, just based on all the experiences that we've had, not on the graphs and the systematic data collection, but on what you experience. One of the things that I think has come through, I mean, by the way, sidebar, one of the privileges that that parents have and that also gifted mediums have is they don't have to um, what's the word, wear the cross of being remaining close to controlled evidence. It's all right to be more freer to be able to experience the world and celebrate it. But so it's in that spirit, I'll say the following. First of all, certain things are easier on the other side than it is for us. And one of the things, for example, I will joke and say that it's easier to multitask on the other side compared to here. So, whereas, for example, I can remember when I lived at Yale and that I had three pet goats in my backyard named Tosca, Manon, and Figaro after three operas. I loved animals, and you could have goats, pet goats, in Guilford, Connecticut, and so I had them. And I love it. And in my mind, I can go right there, and I'm there in my mind, and I'm in the backyard with them, and so on. And when I'm there, um, I'm not physically here, and vice versa. If I'm one place, if I'm, and typically when we go somewhere, where it's we can split our consciousness, but we're physically located in one place. The data suggests that in the same way that we can hold two thoughts at the same time here, there we can do so as well, but it's possible to literally be in multiple places at the same time and coordinate that activity. It's a level of opportunity that we don't normally have. As I joke and say, it's easier to ask multitask on the other side. Another phenomenon is that Rhonda will. I've learned that if something occurs to me in the middle of the night and I feel the urge or the need to want to communicate with members of the A team ASAP, I can ask Rhonda, is if she's okay with this, would she mind having a spontaneous meeting with the A team? And she will then contact the A team, and the time it takes, it's like they're always on call. They'll always take a text message. Um, and because they can be in multiple places at the same time, it's part of the reason that they could do this, but also continue doing what they're doing. I've just now explained something to myself. Um, Consequently, and how long does it take to get from where they are to here? The response is the speed of thought. It'll take me 10 to 15 minutes for us to drive to our new private laboratory. We now have Laboratory of Advances in Consciousness and Health too. It takes me 15 minutes and Rhonda to get there. It takes them the speed of thought. And when we were doing collaborative research with our engineer in California, where we would be here in Tucson using TeamViewer, and they would be in the laboratory in was it Santa Clara? I don't remember what the name of the town was right now. Anyway, and they would be here, and we'd say, okay, we're ready for you to go to the lab, and then we'll check in with you. How long does it take them to get to California? The speed of thought. For me, it would be a big trip, especially at my age. So there are two examples where there are adventures that we can have and abilities that we have that we don't normally have at this, at least at this level in this state.
Those are beautiful examples, and I am so excited about being able to see you and Rhonda in person at the conference. I am so grateful to have had Mark Anthony on here. I think Rocky's on here as well, but
Really?
my screen isn't big enough to show. Irene, do you have any words of wisdom that you would like to say before we sign off? I'm so grateful. Seriously.
Yes, no words of wisdom, just thank you. We're so grateful. Thank you for everything that you do. And we can't wait to see you in August. We're so excited.
Well, I can't wait to see you, and it's privileged. I think the work you're doing is so important, and it provides hope and inspiration for me as an individual for humanity because of what you're doing
Oh.
and the greater human. So thank you.
Thank you so much. We are so grateful to hear that and to have had you on here for 1 hour this evening. I know that everyone loves to be able to say thank you and good evening. So if you all would like to unmute and do so, please go ahead. And we'll get to see you soon, as well as your new book. Can't wait for it.
Thank you, Dr. Schwartz.
Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Dr.
Can't wait
Thank
to read your
you so
book.
much.
Wonderful.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schwartz. Thank you.
you.
Thank
Good
you,
evening.
everyone.
Thank you,
Carrie.
Carrie.
Thank you,
Thank
Carrie. I
you.
look forward to
Thank
seeing you.
you.
Yay,
Ditto.
Howard.
I see you. Okay. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Early bird.
Thank you.
Much love. Thank
Carrie.
you so much.
Thank
Bye,
you.